Beloved, will you bow your heads in prayer with me, please? Abba, we thank you for your words for us this morning. Mary's praises and reminders of what it means to be called as your servant. She reminds us that you worked through the lives of ordinary people. Help us not to forget that this Advent season and beyond. We ask that you might open not only our eyes and our ears, but our hearts and our minds, so that we might bring your words and live your words out in the hurting world. We ask this prayer in the name of Emmanuel, and all God's beloved said, Amen. Do you think Mary wanted to be married? Do you think that Mary wanted to be married? That was a question that was asked in our recent Wednesday morning Bible study. We're taking a look at Adam Hamilton's The Journey. And 2 weeks ago, we were looking at Mary. And that question was asked, do you think Mary wanted to be married? Imagine for a minute that you are 13 years old, approximately, and an angel appears to you and tells you, Dewey, that you are favored by God. Or you, Ellen, that you are favored by God. Or you, Ray, or you, Leroy, or you, Peyton, that an angel appears and tells you you are God's favorite one. Like Mary, you might wonder what the angel could be talking about. How many of us would wonder if the angel had the right person? I mean, what's this all about, receiving God's favor? What does that mean? Does it mean receiving riches? If we're favored by God, do we get riches? Or maybe if we're favored by God, we receive our heart's desire? Whatever it is that we've been wishing or wanting? Maybe receiving God's favor means that we receive the love of our lives? Well, in Mary's case, it was none of those things. Or maybe it was all of those things. You see, the angel Gabriel announces to Mary that she would conceive and bear a son who would be called holy, called the Son of God. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this response of a 13-year-old. Or even if we forget about her age for a minute, imagine your response to the angel. What would you say? Really? Really? What would you do if an angel told you to do something? Not necessarily maybe birth Jesus, but what would you do if an angel appeared to you? Mary's response was pretty simple. She said, "Here I am, Lord, your servant. Be with it, let it be with me according to your word." In other words, she's saying, let whatever you say happen. In other words, she's saying, yes. Yes, Lord. And what is she saying yes to, beloved? That's the question. Does she even know? Does she have any concept of what she's saying yes to? Because back in those times, she's saying yes, knowing she could be stoned to death. She said yes, knowing she could die in childbirth. Remember, no hospitals back then. It was a risk when women had children. Mary said yes, knowing that it could cause her parents, her family, huge amounts of grief. She's going to be looked at as an outcast. And yes. She said yes, knowing that it would probably lead Joseph to call off their marriage. We don't know how she felt about Joseph, whether she loved him, whether she didn't. But she still said yes. And thank goodness she did. Because all of God's plans to come into this world depended on what Mary would say to God's messenger. Which brings back up the question, did Mary want to be married? In the midst of her confusion, in the midst of her uncertainty, in the midst of her fear, she said yes. And that's the reason, beloved, we tell her story year after year, or we should, because we learn from Mary how to respond when God calls us. What will you say, beloved, or when God calls you to do something? Mary's mission reminds us that God's calling on our lives can be a difficult one. I mean, we don't know what Mary's plans were or her hopes and dreams. Same with us. We don't know what God might be calling us to do. And God's call might ask us to set aside our own plans. God's call might ask us to set aside our own hopes and our own dreams. God's plan might require taking risks. Because sometimes God's plan requires us to be with people we might not want to be with. Sometimes God's call asks us to go places we might not want to go. Sometimes God's call asks us to do things we don't want to do. And that's why we tell Mary's story. Understanding that when we call ourselves God's beloved, it doesn't necessarily mean that the way is going to be an easy one. That our life is not going to be a cushy life because we have that word Christian associated with ourselves. What it does mean, beloved, is a life of trust. Trusting in God means taking risks. Risks that enabled Mary to say, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For he has looked upon me with lowliness." I'm lowly, I'm just a servant, she says. And then in her next breath, she realizes the magnitude of what God is asking her to do. Surely all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. Mary talks about his mercy, and how his mercy goes from generation to generation. I know that some of you are struggling with things. Diagnosis that you wish you didn't get. I have a parishioner at St. John's who's 32 and was just diagnosed with MS and is wondering, why did God give me this? Being a beloved follower of Christ doesn't mean the way is going to be easy. And no, God does not give us diseases. God does not make bad things happen to us. That's the evil that's in the world. What you can be sure of, what Mary reminds us of, is that God walks with us through the valleys and up to the mountaintops. God is with us always, bringing the powerful down from their thrones and lifting up the lowly. Mary was just an ordinary person, a mere nobody in her village, and yet God called her. So don't think for a second that God can't call you or me to do amazing things. And knowing how Mary responded to God's request inspires us to respond. Here I am, Lord. Let it be with me according to your word.